Okay, welcome everyone. Here with us today, well, I'm Greg Kaminski. My teaching area is ESOL, but I work with online learning and work with faculty course development. And I also taught a reading class, Reading 115, hybrid last term. So we also have Nora Stevens. Nora, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, Nora Stevens. I teach in biology as well as in health information management. I teach the anatomy physiology for them.
Great. Austina?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Austina Fong. I am the online faculty mentor for math and also an instructor.
Stacie?
Hi, I'm Stacie Williams and I teach in communication studies and I'm also an online faculty mentor.
Right. Peter?
Hi, Peter Seaman. I work in online learning where I'm an online faculty mentor for a bunch of different disciplines, and I run the OIO, the Online Instructor Orientation, which is the entry-level training program for new online instructors, and if you've been through that program, you probably know me from that. Also, I taught English and writing at the college level for many years before I went back to grad school and got an instructional design degree, so I do that too. Thanks.
And Casey, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Casey Twining. I'm an instructional technology specialist at Rock Creek campus, if a campus is still a thing. I'm in a support role, and maybe you've taken a training as well. I provide lots of workshops with the tools and how to use them themselves.
Okay, great, thanks. So here's what we hope to do today, that we'll be able to help you discover alternative assessment approaches that could be used for formative or summative assessment of learning outcomes in your remote course, and then identify some tools within our technology kit here at PCC that can support those alternative assessment approaches, and then to list create an awareness so you're aware of different assessment types and identify which types of outcomes they will measure well. Then, Nora, would you like to talk first?
All right, thank you. So I've been teaching online for 5-6 years, something like that, plus hybrid for quite a long time. And I keep learning new stuff. What do you know? Honestly, one of my very favorite things that I've been doing is what I call muddy point, cool point. It's a very simple discussion technique I have my students do every week, where they make an initial post saying the thing that was muddiest or most challenging or whatever for them in the reading or the material. And then the cool point, because we don't want to get too down, right, about what you don't understand. So instead now we do a cool point about the coolest thing that you read or that you discovered during the week. And then I have them respond to 2 of their colleagues. And I love this thing. I mean, for one, they get to talk about both what they're having trouble with and what they're doing well with. And I get to see it, right? So, but I also they get a chance to really support each other. So I encourage them to, if that was something that they struggled with and then just figured it out, then how did they figure it out? Was it a mnemonic? Was it a website? Was it a this? Was it a that? And I work, especially in the HIM program, I work a lot with cohorts. So these are going to be students who are going to be going out, away from me, away from the college, but these people in their classes are going to be their people to support. And so I love that it makes a very collegial atmosphere. And it really gives me a chance to see like, oh, lots of people were talking about, they didn't understand this thing. And so I'll get in there and answer some of the more challenging questions and make sure that all of those get answered. And it's a good assessment, right? I get to hear what is the thing that they're struggling with and what are they, I get to it's more of a class-wide thing. And so they get points for this. So, how good are their answers? None of this like, yeah, that sucks. That doesn't get points, right? It has to be helpful. And if they post a website, they have to say what's on the website and things like that. So it's a really simple one, but it really gives you a lot of information about your students and where they are.
Thank you, Nora. Just going to pause there just after each one. So I'd like you to feel free to type questions into the chat. We'll have time for a lot of questions afterwards. But if you have any specific questions for Nora and what she has shared, feel free to type questions into the chat. Or you can raise your hand in the participant window.
Greg, this is Peter. There's a great question in there. What is an online mentor?
Yeah, online faculty mentors we've had them for since about 2010. Online instructors are assigned a specific person in their subject area to help guide through the course development process and to bring them along, help the development of the course, and then to review the course, the quality of the course before it goes live. So we've had some of the mentors on board since the beginning, and others have kind of rotated out every couple of years.
But not to get support from one. I mean, particularly right now, I'm gladly giving a lot of support to faculty who are moving remote, who have never done any online teaching. So that's here for you as a resource for sure.
Right. Definitely. Thank you. Walter, you have a question?
Yes, I have a few. This is Walter Morales from Computer Science. And I may have the same issue as math, where we need to have the students to come into campus to do the proctor exams and understand that Examity and some other of those places are not open fully. And then we do have a lot of students to do so. So I've been kind of investigating a program we can use to be able to monitor what the students are doing on their system. And then one suggestion was to use this tool, but I realized if we have 30, 40 people in the classroom, I have to create like breakout rooms, and then that will be pretty much impossible. And then, so I look at something that we have already on the classroom. I'm not sure Sylvania does, but I am at Rock Creek. It's called LanSchool, and there's something called LanSchool Air, where we can actually watch what the students are doing on their computer monitors. We can block them. We can just limit the websites they can visit, so on and so forth. So I was wondering if that's something that you guys could possibly, I'm not sure what would be the kind of approval process for you guys to let us use this kind of thing. And if so, if that's going to be like a universal type of permission, because this LanSchool folks, they're providing free licenses until July, and it'll be wonderful to be able to use it so we can actually watch what the students are doing and then make sure that they don't Google all the answers for the questions type of thing. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Walter. Yeah, good. No, it's good to hear about the LanSchool offer and all. And let's follow up with this after the session today, and then maybe we can get the online mentor for the CS department involved in this as well. So we'll get in touch with Doug and make this an effort to look at that. For now, but speaking of proctoring, I know math has had some difficulties because they are supposed to be doing a lot of proctoring and all. And so Austina is probably ready to share something next. Then, so Austina, yeah, if you could go ahead and.
Thanks, Walter.
Great.
Yeah, so I'm the online faculty mentor for math, and I also teach math online. So yeah, most of the time in our math classes, we do have proctored exams where students have to either come to campus and take the exam or go to a testing center to have the exam proctored. So that's kind of like where we were before this. So now we are figuring out how we're gonna make this work. And so I think that, there's different ideas, but I think that with where we're at right now, it's kind of unreasonable for us to expect that we can actually proctor exams in the same way that we're doing before. So I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen and pull up some slides that I kind of just whipped up here. So that kind of gets with my first bullet point here of keep it simple and have faith in your students. So my trust goes a long way. I certainly understand that cheating is something that we have some concerns about. But I think that it shouldn't be our number one concern. Students are already going through a lot, and just trying to keep it simple and assist them as best as we possibly can, given the circumstances. So what I've done in the past for exams in my online classes, I have given at-home midterm exams before, and I kind of just make sure I set up the communication and the expectations that students would not be using any outside resources, working with another, or maybe I do let them use outside resources, and I kind of change my exam to better fit that setup. So as long as, making sure that we're communicating the expectations to them, remind them that as their instructor, we're here to support them and we want them to succeed. So Barbara Steinhurst, who's actually on here right now, sent a reply a while back when we're kind of starting to talk about this, that you can kind of rewrite the way that you do your exams and consider using like non-Googleable questions for your assessment. So things like fill a missing step. You might have like, worked out problem and they kind of have to fill in that missing step, working a problem multiple ways, find and explain the error, list different characteristics of things. So this is just an idea. And then if you wanted to test someone on their ability to graph, you could maybe have them find a formula based on a graph, as opposed to, given the formula, now graph the function, which they could, of course, just go to Desmos and do. So that's just some examples. And Barbara, oh, thank you. That came from Maria Anderson, she said, at Venus Girl. So definitely lots of ideas you can do to kind of test your assessment so that it's not so easy for students to cheat on. So that's kind of one thing I had in mind. Now, I think for a lot of us who are in like the sciences, math, computer science, those kinds of fields, I know at least for math, most of us are still planning on giving exams, but maybe not, fully proctored using Examity or things like that, and just trusting that our students are going to follow the policy that we have outlined. So if you're kind of on board with that, here are some things that you can do to kind of make that work. One thing that I've done in the past is I've used a checklist in D2L to communicate the exam policy to students. And so that way they get to see the exam policy before they actually have the exam in front of them, so that they understand the expectations. And then you can set up a release condition on that exam in the assignments tab so that the checklist has to be complete to gain access. So let me just show you really quick what that would look like. Like here's my at-home midterm exam for my online Calc 1 class. And so this is what it would look like to the student. They would come into this checklist and then they would read through it and kind of check everything as they go. And they have a progress bar up at the top. Actually, it looks like I had to get out of student view, but anyways, they could go through and check all of these, that they understand this. And then you would have a release condition in that assignments. So pull up here, I'm in the assignments tab now. So you could actually set up in the restrictions that there is a release condition, that they have to go through this checklist before they're able to see the exam. So completed a checklist, and then you would go find that particular checklist. So I know I went through that fast. I don't want to do like full details of things. If you're interested on how to do that, I did put some links into that sheet that you guys are working on here. Is it this one? Yes, this one here. So if you scroll down, I have a checklist that links out to Brightspace, and then release conditions that also links out to Brightspace. So that's just one idea that I had, and that's probably something that I'm going to be doing in my online calculus courses and my remote calculus course as well. And then signatures go a long way as well. There's been studies out there that if students actually put their signature on something, they're more likely to take it seriously. So what I usually do is I can have students either check or initial that they understand the exam policy beforehand, and then actually sign something at the end of the exam, kind of like reiterating that not only were they intending to follow the exam policy, but then they actually did follow the exam policy. And I've been offering these at-home midterm exams in my online calculus courses for like a few years now. And I've only had maybe a handful of students that it was pretty obvious that they cheated on it. Otherwise, I felt like they were good assessments of the student's knowledge. I'm going to look at the chat. Are there any questions about anything I've mentioned so far? Let's see. Okay.
Austina, this is Peter. I really like that one. I think Estefania has a question in here about whether the checklist items could be shared. I really like yours, and you could share them with others, right?
I'm sure there's probably a way. I don't know the exact way, but I'm sure there is.
Or we could share them in online learning.
Yeah, perhaps we could maybe just set up a checklist that gets put into everyone's shells, that then they could just, then assign the checklist. I'm not sure if that's a possibility. And then I could maybe tweak mine a little bit to make it a little bit less geared towards my own, because mine mentions module numbers and things like that, that isn't going to necessarily pertain to everyone. So
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, that's what Estefania was talking about, or was asking about the checklists, if they're written by the instructor. And I thought in most cases, they're probably written by the instructor, but it'd be nice to be
Yeah.
able to hear.
Yeah, like I created that particular checklist for that one.
This is James. Can I ask a question?
Of course.
How strict are you when it comes to enforcing time limits? Because a lot of us allow grace periods. Do you still allow? I mean, do you still count the points even after that grace period, or do you just say too bad? I've been running into an issue with a couple students that. I mean, it's hard for me to say whether they're cheating. I know there are tools that we can look at to see how long they've been in certain portions of our online classes. But I've had students that started the exam, 15 minutes to take it, 5-minute grace period, and all of the answers are, all the questions are answered like after the grace period and all done in less than a minute. So that kind of clues me in that they're looking or searching for the answers and then inputting the answers at the very end. So I'm curious, how strict are you when it comes to enforcing grace periods and whether or not you allow them to continue and count those points?
I'm usually pretty strict on exams that, like, if they miss the deadline for an exam, I'm pretty strict on it, but especially given the circumstances of this term, I'm probably going to be a little bit more loose about it. I think it also depends on whether you're releasing exam solutions or things like that. I think in general, this term, we want to give students kind of the benefit of the doubt and be as supportive of that we can. Or at least that's just kind of my take on things. And we might have some situations with students taking advantage of things, but I think we should kind of keep in mind that, I mean, we should hope that students are going to be doing what's best for them and best for their learning. And then there's only kind of so much that we can do as instructors to enforce things without actually fully proctoring these exams. So again, getting back into like writing exam questions that aren't so easy to just Google the answer to. We might have to kind of change the way that we actually assess students. And then as far as timed versus untimed goes, it kind of is just up to how you would want to do things. Like you could, one thing that I had in mind was you could have multiple portions to an exam. So maybe one portion could be like more of a skills portion where you're just trying to assess if the student can do certain basic skills. Like in math, that could be factoring or solving equations or taking derivatives, things like that. And that would be a good thing to have timed, that just, okay, can you do these things in a timed setting? And then maybe you could have more of another portion that's more on the conceptual side where maybe resources would actually be allowed. And you could write questions in a certain way to where you can really gain whether they understand the concepts that have been learned in the class or not.
Walter, you have your hand up. Is that a new question?
Yes. So the other things were discussed in our SEC was like do a pledge, to sign things, and then also to do the exam things. I think just the problem currently is that everybody's trying to do some catch up and then to rewrite out the tests, to rewrite out the exams, especially people that do like weekly quizzes and then their proctor. It might be a time constraint and almost impossible to do it. So when I start researching, I said, okay, how can we mimic what we already do in class, the closest that it's possible with the technology that's out there? So of course, cost was one thing with the Examiny and those other services. So I said it has to be something that's free. And then also what I realize now is that about 30% of my students do not have a webcam. So when you do something with Examiny, they ask you to get your camera, zoom around the classroom or your test environment, your desk to make sure. So for me, the issues that I have, and I'd love to trust all the students, but they start making this thing with this, what is it called? Discourse thing, I guess. They say, hey, who wants to be in the discourse group? And I noticed they start exchanging assignment answers and that type of stuff. So for me that's just me, I guess, to be satisfied with the least amount of cheating possible, like from copy and pasting, chatting on a little screen on the side and saying, oh, this answer is this or this answer is that, would be actually watching their computer screen and making sure there's no little Skype going on, or they're going to a website and copying and pasting the answer. So this basically is the same thing as if I was in the classroom, watch them working on their tests. So that's the closest they can get to that experience without having to go through and having them signing pledges or creating new tests and doing all that other stuff.
It
But I
is
guess that's me.
challenging. I think another challenging thing is, like you said, Walter, even if you do have like a program like Examity to be able to monitor computers and things like that, like you said, not everyone's going to have a webcam and be able to do that. And not everyone's going to have maybe doesn't even have the internet access to be able to even take an exam like that. So we want to make sure that we're also being equitable to students, that students who have better technology aren't getting like a leg up on other students who maybe don't have as good of access to technology or internet access.
Okay, thank you. Good questions, Walter. Thank you for sharing. And I think some of that we'll have to look into down the road here after the session directly with you. We'll be moving on to Peter.
Hi, everybody. I'm Peter. I work in online learning, and I wanted to pick up on Austina's point about assessing differently, that maybe it's important now to start thinking about different ways to assess rather than the ways that you have always assessed students. Let's see here. This is a little, this is the website from Dalhousie or Dalhousie. It depends on where you come from in Canada. And I really like this little list that they came up with of creative approaches to help students complete key assessments. But anyway, the reason I wanted just to show this very quickly is that I'm very interested in this idea about the Journal of Visualized Experiments. So for those of you who teach in some areas where you would really like students to be able to show what they can do, the idea here is that you can come up with some experiments, concepts, protocols, and things where these things are kind of simulated. Let me click over now to a course that I created some years ago called the Online Teaching Simulation, which is something that I use for my trainees. And I just want to explain a little bit about the structure of this, because this is kind of like the key assessment piece that I'm hoping you might walk away with thinking about this idea a little bit. So the idea, going back to what Austina said before, is to think about assessing your students in ways that are different from what you've done in the past. And the way that my little simulation is set up here is that I present, and I'm not just going to click into these at the moment because I want you more to see the structure than to see the actual example. But the idea is that there are 4 parts of every module, and every module starts with a presentation. And the presentation gives the students a scenario, gives the trainees a scenario to think about. And then ask them, it may ask some specific questions or ask for a specific reaction. But then I have in every module a 1A and a 1B assignment. I'll scroll down here to the bottom again so you can kind of see how this works. So in every module, there's a presentation 1A or presentation A and a presentation B. And then there's sorry about the scroll here. And then there's assignment A and assignment B. And the idea is for the assignment, for the student in the A assignment to talk about what that student would do or what the student thinks is important about this situation. And then the B presentation is a little video that talks about some best practices, some things the student might think about doing to address the scenario. And then in the B assignment, the student simply talks about what the student learned from the presentation, how the student's answer changed, what the student might do differently in the future. So my assessment is based on the difference between the student's B and A answers. So in other words, I'm trying to kind of assess like what sort of growth I saw the student making between, you know, sort of the A and the B in the assignment. So that's how I assess. I'm assessing based on that. Let me just tell you though, that in my experience of having done this for a couple of years, I still get a lot of students, a lot of trainees who in the A assignment, they get very uncomfortable with this idea of putting out something that could be wrong. Because what I'm assessing is I'm assessing the difference between what the student first said and then what the student said later. And I still get a lot of people who say like, oh, I really hate this. This is really uncomfortable for me. You know, you didn't tell me what the right answer was. right? Because a lot of times we're assessing students on what they say back to us about what we told them before. But again, I tell them, if you don't know the answer, tell me where you look to find the answer. Tell me about your thought process to get there. So again, I'm trying to assess differently. Instead of assessing on like, this is the right answer, or this is the wrong answer, I'm assessing on, did you get to the right answer, and how did you get to the right answer, and how is that going to help you get right answers in the future, if that makes sense. I'm going to stop there and take any questions that any of you might have about this way of doing things.
Thank you, Peter. Are there any questions?
And again, the whole idea, I'm trying to go back to what Austina was saying before, which is, let's think about some different ways that we can assess students in this new environment. Because, right, most of our assessment in colleges and universities is based on an efficiency model, right? We kind of have to be efficient. We have a lot of students. We have a lot of material to get through. Since no one's asking me a question, I want to ask Austina a question based on what you said before. Austina, have you ever assessed anybody with a live whiteboard where you go in and say, hey, student, here's a problem, quadratic equation or something. I want you to work this equation for me and do it live, and then, see if the student did it correctly?
I've never done that in like an assessment way as far as like giving a student a grade for it. But definitely I do that when I'm working with a student one-on-one, struggling with a concept, and we're kind of working it out together. I have, though, like at the end of last term when our finals kind of got canceled, we had most of the math folks allowed students to take the final if they wanted to improve their grade. But it was going to be like, I wanted mine to be done in a proctored way. So I didn't have very many people take it, but I proctored my exam through Zoom where everyone had their own breakout room. They shared their screen with me, and I could also see them on the webcam. That worked well in a small scale thing, but I don't think it would work well in a large scale with every single student, and especially the equity issues that not everyone does have the webcam and the access to technology. But it was something that was able to work for me at the end of last term. But again, not something I would do this term.
Yeah, thanks. I'm really interested in that idea of, trying to get students to like show more of what they know. And maybe some of these tools can help us do that. But again, I know that there's, you mentioned the breakout rooms, there's no efficiency model around these things, right? It's, you have 120, 140 students or whatever. It's incredibly time consuming to have every single student, show what the student knows.
Definitely.
Right. I remember you were talking about meeting them in Zoom, for example. So give that oral exam then, for example. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know. It's a dream I have, right?
Yeah.
I noticed that Ralph has his hand raised.
Ralph, yeah, question.
Yeah, and it's more like a comment. Just listening to Peter's ideas, and they remind me that when I took the Teaching Men of Color course, that long distance course, it's a great course with great teaching practices that are designed to foster racial equity in particular, and reflective writing, reflecting on learning, reflecting back on what people are thinking is one of the top 5. So and it's something that most of us weren't trained to do and most of us didn't experience in our educations. The more times you can ask students to reflect and give them points for it, the better it's going to go. And studies show it really is an inclusive, welcoming process, or inclusive, welcoming piece of our practice too. So more power to you, Peter. Good ideas.
Thanks, Ralph. Appreciate it.
Looking at the chat, Stacie, I like that idea too. Have students write their own exam questions. I've done that before. It works quite well because it really involves a lot of thought on their part.
Yeah, I've often found that they end up writing exam questions sometimes that were more challenging than I initially intended to create, but actually having students write exam questions can be a type of assessment, even if you don't use those questions, which I think particularly in I teach in communication, so while I still might use a strategy like that, I could see how it could be incredibly valuable in some of the sciences and even math or some of that, to write some questions. It's a great way to flip how your brain approaches thinking about the content as well.
Right, I've done that and let students know that I'm going to use a portion of their questions anyway, so they have a little more incentive to do that. Right. Pardis, do you have a question?
I've been listening to all these wonderful, amazing teaching ideas. And if I was experienced online teacher, I would use every single one of these ideas. They're amazing. They're thoughtful. They're great. I was hoping that I'm very elementary at this. I had 1 week to go online, I didn't have months of training. And I know I'm speaking for more people than just myself, that I cannot use a lot of these ideas that are being shared because I have just a limited amount of time. Every time somebody says to click on this link, I realize, oh, this is another hour of reading, learning, doing, which I I'm a part-time teacher, and I'm hoping for some like quick practical things I could use from this lecture. And I'm getting a lot of great teaching ideas, don't get me wrong, but I need to be, I like you to please be more practical for those of us who cannot have multi-layered exams created in this short amount of time and have it be delivered online. And I don't even know once it's delivered online how I'm going to be able to correct it. I usually don't correct stuff online. So that's just a comment. I don't know if that was a question.
Do you mind if I jump in and talk about that a little bit?
Sure.
Thank you, Pardis, because that's a really good point. I know like a lot of us are kind of thrown into this situation of almost becoming online instructors when we haven't been in the past. So what I would say, just the kind of like blanket recommendation would be to do what you're comfortable with. Like think about how you would have assessed your students in a normal term and just try to maintain that as best you can. And I know it's not going to be perfect. None of us are going to make perfect assessments, but we need to do what's best for us as instructors, and we need to do what's best for our students. So when it comes to these exam times, I think just keeping it simple and kind of keeping in regards to what you were going to do anyway. So if you were going to give like a paper exam in class, then, put that exam in D2L, make sure you have a cover page that outlines what your expected policy is for the students to follow, whether that be that it's okay to use resources, but maybe not tutors or other people. Maybe that's your exam policy, or don't use anything, like you should only have just you and a pen and paper, then make that your policy. As long as it's a clear policy, you don't even have to make it timed. You could just at the bottom say, when was your start time? When was your end time? And it needs to be within a 2-hour time period or 3-hour time period or whatever you are thinking it to be. I would recommend using the assignments tab to make it easiest as far as like students submitting their work and for you to grade their work, because then you can actually use the annotation tool in the assignments tab to hand grade their work. Those are just some of my ideas.
It's been, the other difficulty has been I have been teaching without knowing what my exam looks like, because quite often when I'm teaching, I always look at like, what's my assessment going to look like? What I want my students to be able to get out of this. And this has been flipped on me, which is like I'm teaching without knowing what my assessment is going to look like or how the students are going to react to it. Not to say that I teach to the test, but at the same time, when you're teaching and you're giving lectures and you're giving examples, you try as a teacher to also tell students what your expectations are all along. And this has been like, I have said this to many of my friends, I feel like I'm a first-year teacher again. It's like things are going very fast. I think I'm doing a good job. I hope I'm doing a good job. I'm not doing any harm, but that's besides the point. But thank you for the suggestions. I'll for sure use that.
And you're certainly not alone. And like you said, you feel like things flipped on you as an instructor. That's how a lot of our students are too. A lot of our students intentionally don't sign up for online classes and they prefer to have face-to-face classes. So I think that's another thing for us to keep in mind, is that this is new territory for a lot of us as instructors, but it's also new territory for a lot of our students.
Thank you, both of you. Thank you, Pardis, for sharing that. And I want to make sure that we follow up with you after the session today as well, because I'd like to continue this conversation with you. And Ralph, I see you have a hand raised.
Yeah, it was really for hearing Pardis's really thoughtful description of how this is as a shift for those of us who haven't taught online. And the one thing that's been working best for me, because there's so many resources out there, there's so many places to go to look for things. Each of us has our own bandwidth, time and energy for that. So Pardis, just follow your instincts there, but don't be afraid to reach out one-on-one to people. The most valuable help I've gotten in making adjustments has been whenever I've had a specific question, I've found someone to talk to. The faculty help desk has worked pretty well for me. I got lucky to talk to Stacie one day to help me set up a bunch of stuff in D2L. You can contact anybody in the Math Sack anytime, send a Math Sack blast out, and you'll find someone who's going to support you with any question, especially specific stuff. Just one-on-one will help you out the fastest we can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we definitely want to follow up with that. Thanks, Ralph. That's excellent advice. And I'm going to share my screen now and just share a few things. And it sort of ties into what you're saying, Pardis, and that is keep it simple. I think baby steps, small steps, taking one step at a time, learning a new tool, not trying to do too much any given term, and being flexibility. This point number 4 that I've written here, this is on your document as well. So I'm under the alternative assessment strategies, but flexibility is crucial right now for you, for us as instructors, and for students as well, given the situation. So different things will work in your situation, even submitting a picture of a handwritten paper that the students are able to do, and take a picture of it and send it to you. If that's going to work for you, if that's what is going to work in terms of the technology, then let's allow that and be able to do that. Point number 3 here, I wanted to mention, provide multiple options for meeting the outcomes. For example, through contract grading, then give students a choice and the responsibility for choosing how they are going to be assessed. Maybe it'll be a written paper, maybe it's going to be an oral presentation, illustration, draw something, put a scrapbook together, could be an essay exam, maybe they'll write up a fictional interview with someone, but think out of the box in terms of alternative assessments that might also satisfy the outcomes, something beyond the usual multiple choice assessments that we typically give. Number 5, yeah, weekly journal or some type of a periodic journal after the unit. So a time for students to reflect on what they've learned. So metacognitive reflection, what they've learned and how they've learned that. Then what's the process? What did they follow? So this is something I do with my reading class, and it seemed to work quite well. So students can look at the progress that they've made and reflect on that through the term. And I wanted to mention some another option here. So I mentioned individual presentation as one option. Maybe instead of taking an assessment, a formal assessment, maybe they can do a project of some sort, or make a video presentation or an audio presentation. They might present to each other through discussions or through assignments. I'm going to demonstrate this very briefly, the use of video note and assignments. It can be used in assignments or in the quiz. So I'm just going to jump over here to a D2L shell. As a student, I'll take a look at this in student view and go into assignments. So I have an assignment here set up as a simple a text submission. And within this, students have access to the same tool that we have, this insert stuff icon on the left side, insert stuff, and they're able to go directly to video note and they can record something. So right now I'm recording myself and that's it. And they're able to put it there as a presentation and turn that in as the assignment. So a simple presentation in that sense could work for them. I'm not going to wait for that to render. I'm just going to get out of there, but students would submit that just as any other assignment. This can also be done in the quiz area. So students you could create a quiz that is a writing type assessment, and students can add a video to that question as well in order to answer the question. So with quizzes, it works too. In the interest of time, I'm going to also mention another tool that many of the language and ESOL instructors are familiar with already. So VoiceThread is a tool that could be used. We have access to it right through D2L. It can be added right to your shell. I used it with my reading class. I did not use it as an assessment tool. I used it as a interaction engagement tool for conversation. And so these items, I had students replying to each other so they could see each other's threads and so forth, their entries. But I had them Yeah, commenting on the book, on the prologue to the book, they're there. And I think I forgot to check the box to send the sound to the system, so I won't play it for you. But just know that it can be used individually for students to submit assignments, because with a certain entry in the settings, I can make this restricted so students cannot see the work of other students at all. And in that sense, it can be used as an assessment tool. And that is done. Actually, I just want to make sure that you can see that. So within VoiceThread, it's done in the thread settings, and it's called Enable Comment Moderation. And so I would have to go in and actually make the comment public, which I don't need to do as the instructor. So the students have come on, there's an example, and I do have permission to share these with faculty. So if you'd like to see a closer look, I'd be happy to share this whole VoiceThread if you'd like to, or work with you on it. But students can reply in video or audio or just text. They have a choice. All right, and I think those are the main items that I wanted to share. Oh, one more thing. Group work or individual work, students could also create something, maybe a slideshow, PowerPoint presentation, but right within Google Slides, they can add a slideshow right to the assignment area as well. So they can submit a slideshow they have created individually or with a group and submit that as an assignment too. So just trying to think of other possibilities beyond the usual quiz.
Greg, there were a few assessment puzzles on the document that I don't necessarily know we got quite to all of them. So maybe we could spend a couple of moments trying to touch on a few of those.
Yeah, right. That was our next step here, actually, to try to get to those. So thanks, Stacie. So any of the mentors or anyone in the audience, we have a lot of experts here already, not just the mentors, but I know many in this group already teach online and have useful information to share. Any thoughts here for any of these?
I'll say quickly as an overarching theme that sort of asking what goal you are trying to promote with some of the assessments or types of activities you normally do in class can be a great place to start, because if you think about the goal that you want to accomplish more than the method, sometimes that frees you up to think about some other creative approaches to that, because I know I can get stuck in the way that I've done things, and trying to replicate it in a virtual modality can sometimes be a little counterproductive instead of thinking up some new ways. So I'll say for a couple of the ones that are a little closer to my subject area of communication, things like short writing assignments or free writes or things like that. I think there's actually a lot you can do in Google Docs that are shared with students. If you wanted students to write a few sentences or share something, you could even just create a simple 2-column table in a Google Doc shared with everybody in the course. And you could just paste your roll sheet on one side that's like, you know, Eleanor C and Stacie W and Peter S, you know, like give a quick list and have folks write a few words that can be shared with the class or a few sentences, and then talk about that collaboratively. So some really straightforward things like that can be helpful. You could have students paste things in the chat, but it can be a little, keeping track of the chat can be a little challenging, and copying things out of the chat can. So using a very simple Google document could be helpful for some of those quick types of things. And I also like the idea of potentially, I know it can be a little time consuming, but thinking about some ways you could do really short oral exams. Maybe there's still an exam they're going to take in a traditional modality, but there's 1 or 2 important questions that you want to talk with students about. You could either have some small group conversations in Zoom with a few students and go through some of those questions together, or I'm a fan of the good old-fashioned telephone. I keep telling people you can dial *67 from your cell phone when calling a student if you want to block your cell phone number. And for some of our students, a 3-minute phone call can yield a lot more content, but also some deeper understanding than even just 250 words typed on a page. So, and honestly, I can give feedback verbally so much faster than I can write it, and I think it has a better tone. So I try to invest a little bit in some of those kind of quick strategies to help with a few of these things.
Yeah, and I did mention that that video note and audio note tools are available in the feedback area as well for assignments. So giving feedback through video, a good way to do it. Thanks, Stacie. But right, the oral exams on Zoom, good place to meet students, or simply through either discussions or I would say assignments or the quiz area. So they can use a video note if possible, or they can attach an audio file. So those are simple ways to do it. Or the voice thread, as I mentioned, because it can be individualized like that. Austina, did you want to say anything more about Adobe Scan?
Yeah, Adobe Scan is basically just an app a student can download their smartphone or tablet, and they uses the camera on their smartphone or tablet to turn their handwritten work into a single multi-page PDF file. So that's what I generally have my students use when they are turning in their handwritten work, because typing math is very time consuming and there's a pretty steep learning curve to it. So I usually encourage students to not bother with equation editors and just actually handwrite their work and find a way to turn it into a single PDF file. Some students just take pictures of it and insert images into Word documents and then save it as a PDF. Cam Scanner is another kind of similar program to Adobe Scan. I know there's more out there, but Adobe Scan is the one that I've liked the most because it syncs up with Google Drive, and so it works really well.
Great. Spelling for ESOL students, yeah, I remember talking, this is a tricky one since they have such ready access to Google and Word and just all the spell correctors and grammar correctors that are right there. Makes me think of something right there in person, like the whiteboard that you mentioned, writing on the whiteboard, and see how they do, or typing things in a chat. But I know you want it directly connected to the student more as an exam. I would just try to shift things whenever possible more to practice, learning experiences. I know assessment is part of it, but maybe some of this contract learning can help in this situation and just being flexible. But one of the most important things that our students need now is just opportunity to practice these things. So vocabulary, I don't need to tell the ESOL instructors that they need opportunities to practice that, but that's going to be the best learning experience. And hopefully they'll find ways to create sentences using the vocabulary terms that will be able to be assessed. Are there other items on here that jump out to anyone?
There's some great ideas going on to the assessment puzzles area and also in the chat.
Effective options for in-class writing exams. So there, I imagine you're talking about a timed experience.
This is Peter again. I know one thing that a lot of us are concerned about is the authentication of the student. In other words, that it's the student who signed up for the class, who's doing the work in the class. I'm kind of hoping that a lot of us will take some of the pressure off ourselves for the next couple months about that, because the way I'm looking at this whole situation is that the institutions like PCC, it was Harvard or whoever it was who first said, we're closing and we're going, completely online. It's not a very well thought out situation. And it's kind of going, I think, back to what Austina said about feeling comfortable with what you're doing is maybe the best we can do at the moment, because there is no 100% authentication method that anybody's come up with. So I think to the extent that we can all come up with ways of making it more likely that students will do the right thing and do the best thing for themselves as students, and maybe that's all we can do in this situation, and we just need to let go of the 100% authentication of the student doing the work. And if anyone has any other thoughts on that, I'd love to hear them.
Nora here. Yeah, I'm teaching a lot of students who are going into nursing or field where, honestly, I talk to them about it. I say, do you want to be that person? Cheated your way through, who then you have a person on the table in front of you, and what you remember will determine whether they live or die. And yeah, I put it that bluntly because I know that the pressure for getting into nursing schools and stuff is so high, and you have to have straight A's and all that stuff. And yet, is that worth it? Right? Is it really worth it to be that person who cheated? So It's not a cudgel I can use in every class, but I think it does help in my nursing classes, pre-nursing classes.
Yeah, that's great, Nora. Thanks.
Thank you. Walter, I see you have a question.
The issue with us, for instance, is that PSU takes pretty much all of our students when they transfer, and we hear back from them. So it's pretty sad to hear sometimes that, oh, well, you know, people that go to your online classes, they don't do as well, or they don't know anything type of comment. And of course, and that's because they, in some situations, they may not be doing their own work, because otherwise if they did, they would have, of course, do as well as the PSU students. So that's why we have a big concern about having students that know their stuff. And I'd love to trust all my students, but we know what happens. So, so that's why we cannot be too flexible actually watching what they're doing, so we know that they know what they're doing.
Yeah. Walter, are there any ideas of even different assessment types, though, that come across that could be used instead of a formal proctored exam?
Well, unfortunately, they also have something called a proficiency exam, where they have to be in a classroom, kind of stressful, and then there's tutors going around and see them actually type in the program as they create them. And the tutors go around and look and say, okay, yeah, looks like you're getting it. Or if they're like half an hour stuck in the same place, they say, well, I'm sorry, you know, looks like you don't know what you're doing, so go back and take this class over again. So it's all about watching what they're doing. I cannot think of a way where we can actually say, okay, do your work without any supervision, submit what you have done, and I can assess that person on something that I did not actually see that person doing.
I do have a kind of a thought on that. It's not going to be perfect, but I do know that like Screencast-O-Matic will allow you to make free 15-minute long videos of your screen. There's probably other programs. I think there's also, probably should mention like the actual PCC supported technology instead. So I think also Kaltura, right, would do the same thing. Although, do students have access to Kaltura?
No, I don't think they have access to that.
Yeah, so I know Screencast-O-Matic, for example, you can make a free 15-minute screen recording, and it's easy. They don't even have to download anything. You can just go right to the program, hit start recording, and then you have the video file that they could then like upload to an assignment tab or something. That way you could actually watch them on their screen doing their thing. Of course, you can't 100% guarantee that they are that person, but it's an idea.
Yeah, we do have Camtasia, and we have cell phones. There's many different ways of telling them or having them recording themselves to show us stuff. And that's why I investigated what is the closest thing we have. And to me, doing whatever we're doing already, watching them do their stuff on their screens, this should work. And also thinking that 30% of the students do not have cameras, then, and that's the only issue I guess I might have. Greg, if you don't mind, I'll just send you the link to join, I guess I'll say my class, so you can see how this LanSchool works.
Okay. Yeah. I assume it's the same type of LanSchool that's in the labs.
Yes, exactly the same thing. It's just done remotely. So, and that's why it's the simplest thing to do if I need to watch them.
Yeah.
Walter, I'll just add really quickly to what Austina said, because I use Screencast-O-Matic a lot for little ad hoc videos. The screen capture function, a student doesn't actually even need a webcam or a microphone for the recording of what's happening on their screen to take place. So maybe it's unrealistic to monitor them for the entire exam, but maybe at some point during the quarter, you could ask them to demonstrate completing one or two specific questions you have for them, whether it's in an exam tool or just in Word or Google Docs or something else, where the program could just capture everything that's on their screen. And again, they don't need a microphone or a video camera for it to record what's happening on their screen. So it could be an option for some things, but there's still the barrier of students knowing how to use the program. But I will say I've found it really easy to use, and they have super great tutorials for how to use the program.
And if you do want kind of like an authentication kind of thing where you are at least feeling a little bit better about them being them, you could have make their first part of their recording showing that they're logged into their MyPCC account. That's, again, not perfect, but if they're logged into MyPCC, then they're probably who they say they are.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. Good. I'm going to stop the recording. an official end to our session here.